Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Life of a Business Manager podcast. On today's podcast, we're joined by my good friend Sonja Clark, who is a Microsoft employee that supports the Copilot product. In her current role at Microsoft, Sonja partners with major companies to scale AI responsibly as they adopt Copilot as their new AI. Now, I've invited Sonja because the previous episode we talk about top AI products for business managers, and I wanted her to come on here to help us understand what Copilot's all about, but also elaborate on this AI phenomenon. What makes Sonja stands out isn't just her expertise in problem solving, it's what she brings to her customers by making AI approachable and impactful for everyone she works with. And when she's not deep in the future of AI for Microsoft, you will probably find her hiking a trail somewhere, exploring the national parks, or having a glass of wine. Let's take a listen to her story. Welcome, Sonja, to the podcast. Maybe what we should do is start with how we met. From my understanding, I think we met at the wine bar where Ilya was selling wine, and then I just
Mhm.
randomly went up to you like a complete weirdo, and that's how we met.
Those are, many of my great friendships in life have started that way. It's just kind of a random interaction. That might be my first one at a wine bar, but yes, that's my memory as well. It was, I think, in the fall of 2018 after I had started working at Microsoft, and that wine shop was sort of down the street from the office I was working out of at that time.
Oh, I didn't know it was down the street. Okay. I
Well,
don't
down Market
remember.
Street, I guess.
Yes. So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, exactly like your background, where you grew up? Actually, I'm kind of curious too. So
Okay.
give us a little bit of background, Sonia.
All right. Well, I'll start at the beginning. I grew up in Puyallup, Washington. I was born in a hospital near there that doesn't exist anymore. I think it's now a mall. There's maybe something there as a part of my life story that I could flesh out. But the town Puyallup that I grew up in, people are challenged to pronounce. It is named after one of the indigenous groups in Western Washington. It's about an hour south of Seattle. When I was growing up in the 80s, it was most famous for the Puyallup Fair, which is now the Western Washington State Fair, I believe is its official name. So that's where I grew up for the first 18 years of my life before I went to college. I moved away to go to a college named St. Olaf in Minnesota. Most people know St. Olaf for the Golden Girls. Well, I shouldn't say most people. I would say women of a certain age know St. Olaf for the Golden Girls. And that was a fictional town that one of the characters was from in that show. But there is a school there in Northfield, Minnesota that I went to for college. And there I studied math and psychology with a concentration in statistics. I lived in Minneapolis for a few years after that, working for some nonprofits doing database management. And I guess that's sort of the start of my professional relationship with Microsoft because I got my first job out of college knowing how to use Microsoft Access, which is a database software. After a couple years working for nonprofits, managing databases, I decided maybe it would be a good idea to get some more education to advance my career. So I moved to Michigan, attended the University of Michigan, and got a master's degree in statistics. And while I was there, I had an internship at the Census Bureau, and that experience worked out well. And I ended up applying for a full time job there after I graduated. And that brought me to Washington, D.C., completing my coast to coast from Washington State to the district in Washington, D.C. I lived there for a couple years working as a mathematical statistician for the Census Bureau. That coincided with the 2010 census. So it was an interesting time to be there and see how this agency corrals all of these people in a very large operation to count every person residing in the United States. And that was before the census was being conducted online. So literal door to door censusing of people. And after a couple years working for the Census Bureau, I took a vacation to visit a friend I had met at a restaurant specializing in beer in Washington, D.C. She had moved out to Northern California and was living in Redding. And I came out to visit her on a vacation and just fell in love with Northern California. Decided I have to move back to the West Coast. I ended up finding a job that moved me across the country. That job was with FICO, the credit scoring company. And I got a job with them as an analyst, helping build custom credit and loan risk origination and behavioral models, and ended up spending 7 years there, and then decided I wanted to solve different types of problems and got a job at Microsoft, which is where I've been for the last 7.5 years. So that's the coast to coast story of Sonia from Puyallup to now Petaluma, California, which is where I live and work mostly remotely for Microsoft.
So it sounds like you moved quite a lot there, Sonia.
Yes, did. I wouldn't say, well, I've been in California now for 15 years. So I've made this my home. I've lived a few different places in the Bay, from San Rafael to Oakland and now to Petaluma. And I definitely feel like I've found my home in California, both professionally as well as in my personal life. I just love everything that Northern California has to offer.
Yes, it's stunning here in Northern California. Just the weather, I mean, it's hard to leave in
Hmm.
general. And then, you like hiking, so there's so many hiking trails. So I mean, there's just so much to do here. So I'm not
Hmm.
surprised that you're staying here. You know what's funny is I took statistics at the junior college in Santa Rosa and did not pass whatsoever. I had to actually repeat statistics. So
Hmm.
I think it's insane that you're a statistics major and graduated with that because it was so hard for me in class. But then working, with numbers now and statistics somewhat, I understand it a lot more than I did in class. Even though my teacher was a really good teacher, I think I just could not comprehend the concept when I was in school.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot. Usually, I don't lead with that necessarily as much anymore, but when I was working as a statistician, it was funny. I was once at a party in DC and somebody asked me what I did for work. And I said, "Oh, I'm a statistician." And her response back to me was, "Oh, I've actually been looking for a new waxer. Maybe you could help me." And I said, "That's actually an esthetician, and they solve different kinds of problems than I do."
That's hilarious.
I know. Uh, that only that only happened once, but usually when I share that, I hear stories similar to yours of people hating their statistics class, really struggling with it. When I was at the University of Michigan, my job there was to be a graduate student assistant, or basically the TA for students who had to take stats for whatever their undergraduate major was. So most of the people that I worked with did not want to be taking the class. And I would always encourage the students to just think about statistics as storytelling. And I think being able to look at a number that we see in the news or referenced in a report and ask questions about where it came from and how that number came to be, in terms of how, if it was from a survey, how the data was collected, how the survey was designed, and really looking at it more as kind of that critical thinking skill, and how numbers come to be representative, or how they are or are not maybe representative, is kind of the most important skill, I think, coming out of statistics that can apply to everyday life.
So then what is your actual current title right now, Sonia, if you're able to share? And what exactly does a typical day look like for you because you work remote?
Hmm. Yeah. So my title within Microsoft is a Copilot Global Black Belt, which usually inspires oohs and ahs. And then what exactly does that mean? So Microsoft came up with this title of a Global Black Belt to be a dedicated sales resource accompanying the account teams that are managing the enterprise relationship that Microsoft has with its enterprise customers, and really dedicated towards workloads that are still used to be considered an incubation, but still kind of at the forefront, where we need to keep a really tight feedback loop between what our customers are experiencing, what our field sales teams are experiencing, and then what our engineering, product management, product marketing teams are building into the products that our customers are using. In this case, Microsoft Copilot, which is Microsoft's generative AI solution built on the large language models, originally most known by people through OpenAI and the ChatGPT models that were released a couple years back.
So that's a really cool title, Sonia. That sounds official.
Official and mysterious. So my typical day to day is often a combination of learning activities. So, keeping up to speed with what is coming down the pike in terms of our product roadmap, understanding the technical underpinnings to be able to explain those to my customers. And then it's working with my account teams to support their sales pursuits. And then it's also meeting directly with customers. As of July, I support customers who are in Microsoft's healthcare and life sciences practice. And specifically for me, that includes US pharmaceutical companies, life sciences, and medical technology.
So then for Copilot, now I don't exactly know too much as far as like when it was actually released or like the back end work. Have you been in this role for some time or were you at like the front end of it?
So Microsoft released Copilot in an early adoption program almost exactly 2 years ago. It was in November of 2023. And at that time, I was not in this role. I was in a similar role, but supporting a different software set. It was Microsoft's Viva platform, which is centered around employee experience. So thinking about supporting employees in communications, employees and organizational leaders in communications and skilling and measurement. So that could be measurement of workplace behavior, sentiment through employee surveys, and things like that. So I was kind of in an adjacent space for what Microsoft called its modern work practice, which was largely centered around productivity. And then when we launched Copilot, Copilot became a part of a lot of the solutions that I had responsibility to sell.
Yes, Ilya mentioned when he was there at the conference that Copilot pretty much can solve all of my Excel problems.
Yes. When he came to visit me at the Copilot Challenge, one of the solutions that we had up was showcasing what's called agent mode in Excel. So it's the idea that you can have this assistant in Excel help you figure out formulas, help you find patterns in data, help you write Python code to do deeper analysis. So it really takes people who might already be at an intermediate to advanced capability in Excel and just takes them to that next level.
So do you think, for example, in my current role, I do like half financial analyst, half like operation, so like full on
Mhm.
business manager. Do you think that because of Copilot and all of the AI right now, and we're seeing them take over pretty much some jobs, I guess from a productivity perspective, it could save us time. Like instead of me sitting there trying to figure out an Excel sheet, Copilot could do that in probably half the time, and then I can focus on other type of work? Or do you actually think it might take over, like, the analyst perspective of a role?
I don't. And one of the phrases that you'll hear a lot from Microsoft is the importance of keeping humans in the loop. And I think right now, I mean, what you just stated is something that I hear from a lot of people I encounter out in the world. I hear it from my customers at Microsoft. There's concern around identifying use cases for agents, for example, because people fear, depending upon the company they're working for, that that might impact their job security. And there was an analogy that I heard from one of the members of our Microsoft research team rather. Researcher is another agent that's available in Copilot. But she was making the analogy that, when electricity came to be, there were jobs that were no longer necessary. We used to have people that had to go out and light the lamps in the street, the lamp lighters. Well, with electricity, you no longer needed people to go out and physically light the lamps, but the advent of electricity created other jobs. And that's commonly what you hear about this now era of AI that we're in, that yes, there may be some jobs that go away or jobs that change in the way that they're carried out, but AI is also going to create new jobs. And just because you have this AI assistant in Copilot or whatever other solution that you're using, but everybody should definitely be using Copilot. I am in sales after all. That doesn't reduce the need to still interpret, to read through. I just think of it as kind of a creative Kickstarter, whether that's creating content or it's summarizing content that, I need to answer a bunch of questions for a customer, for example. I use it a lot that way. Or like in your example for Excel, for somebody who's in an analyst role, maybe it's accelerating the time to come up with the initial insights, but then still leaving them the opportunity to craft the story around that. And that's kind of back to the importance of statistics, is figuring out the story behind the data and being able to convey that and communicate that to whoever your stakeholders are.
Yes, I've actually used Copilot just from a personal perspective. I've been testing out
Mhm.
I'm all for AI because I think it saves time for productivity. Obviously, it's not great to just copy and paste, right? You obviously want
Yeah.
to check your sources with anything on the internet, but I've tested out almost every single AI like Gemini, OpenAI, Copilot, and I was testing some other AI companies as well. There's so many I can't even keep up, but
Mhm.
I noticed for Copilot, it is specifically great for organizations, obviously, that have Microsoft already because you can
Yes.
incorporate all of the tools available, right? Excel, Microsoft, even Access and OneNote, all of that can be incorporated where the tool Copilot can actually take all of those data and project for you or do some sort of analysis for you. Hey there, fellow business managers. Are you looking to save time and boost productivity in your role? Let me introduce you to my Stand Store, where I've put together a collection of ready to use business templates designed specifically for people like us. These templates are practical, professional, and crafted with the day to day challenges of business management in mind. Check out my Stand Store now at standstore/life of a business manager. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast and hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah. And I would say that's one of the key differentiators when I'm trying to explain to people. Most people now are familiar with ChatGPT. That was, I would say, the primary entry point for a lot of people in just their personal use of generative AI and having an understanding of what large language models can do. And so I then tell the story that, well, what if, your large language models, when you're typing in your prompt, that could access all of the data that resides for you at work? So in the world of Microsoft, you probably have documents stored on OneDrive and you have content stored in SharePoint and you have all of your emails and Outlook and you have all of your chats and meetings happening in Teams. So the idea that those large language models have access to all of that data, which is really then relevant towards summarizing, creating content, creating agentic workflows on your enterprise data estate. And that's effectively what a lot of our customers are starting to roll out and adopt for their employees.
I think it's great, Sonia. And obviously, I don't know enough I only know just the basics of Copilot. I obviously don't know, the ins and out, but I can imagine if I'm in like a Teams meeting and it's recorded and I need a summary, right? Because no one has time to read all the notes, but a summary of the highlights of the meetings, or I use Microsoft OneNote a lot just because I don't like to write anything down. I just like to type it and have it available there on the screen. So if they can summarize my notes for me on there or my projects or what's important or my to-do list, just all of that I think could be useful for Copilot.
Yeah. And the example that you gave of taking meeting notes from a transcribed meeting, that is, I think, still one of the hero features of Copilot and just the time savings. Especially most people I talk to are still overloaded with meetings and having overlapping meetings. And there's many times throughout my day where I can't attend all of the meetings on my calendar and I need to prioritize what I attend in person versus what I just catch in a follow-up by reading the recap. So in that sense, that's a huge time saver because I don't have to sit through what used to be hours of recordings, which is not how I want to spend my time after the workday is over.
So then, like, for example, for a role like mine or for any business managers listening out there,
Mhm.
as far as, like, increasing productivity, I know I talked about, like, meetings or taking notes for me or analyzing all my Excel sheet. I think that's still needed if I'm thinking clearly. It's just supposed to help you a little bit as far as, like, do more strategic type of work than I think the analysis type of work. Because if I'm thinking how many hours I actually spend working on Excel sheets and or, reading my notes or typing in OneNote, all of that, that could save. That's probably half the time.
Yep, that's a great example. And then where we're starting to see really supercharge productivity is as organizations start to apply agents to business processes to streamline workflows. And procurement, I would say, is one example. I was just talking to one of our partners at Ignite last week who developed an agent, a customer's procurement team, their global buying team, and they're managing data and systems for procurement across multiple platforms and multiple knowledge sources. So it's really cumbersome to go and check on a particular buying process. You might have to go to 4 or 5 different places and then synthesize that data. And that itself is time consuming. And it's also maybe just kind of error prone because you're having to hop around to all these different places and re reference numbers and POs and invoices and all this stuff. And so this partner developed an agent for our mutual customer to help streamline those processes and help automate some of the things that those folks had to do manually and ultimately improve, accuracy of tracking and following up and free up the time for those people to maybe focus more on escalations rather than hunting and pecking for different sources of data.
That's a great example, Sonia, because I actually work very closely with the procurement department. So I'm curious. So just let's just a little bit kind of dumb it down for me. So when you say in the procurement department, there are buyers. So the buyers that issue the POs after you submit requisitions and all of that. That's how it works for our organizations.
Mhm.
So if you are an agent, are you saying because there's different levels of the buyers, right? So receiving of the requisitions, there's a negotiating part where you're trying to save money for the organization as well, and then there's issuing the PO. Right? So if you create an agent, where in that step would it take over or not take over, but assist a buyer, right? If you are a
Mhm.
buyer in the procurement team, and I'm trying to explain this for the audience listening that doesn't know too much or might know, but I'm trying to kind of like, simple explanation of it. Where would the agent take over from a buyer's perspective?
So I would say there's a distinction between an agent that is just retrieving information versus an agent, what we call autonomous, an agent that would actually take an action. So in the example that I was giving, that would be just a retrieval agent helping pull information, not actually taking an action. Although that could be another step in the agent that it could, maybe there is a handoff process in the management of the PO to the invoice that could actually be automated to take it from one system and to log it in another system, for example. Or maybe there's a step in the agent to flag an error, like there's missing data in a purchase order, and it's scanning that and then flags it to a human with a notification to say, hey, go check on this, go back for correction to whoever it was that issued it, something like that.
Okay, so it would have to be like, for example, you could technically have an agent retrieve the data, right? You retrieve the requisition, review the requisition for, if it's correct or not, right? The personnel, the buyer could actually just do the actual negotiation, and then PO could be issued by an agent if that's possible.
Yep, that could all be possible.
Okay.
And then my other question would be, so in the example of just retrieving information, how many different systems the procurement teams might be working across? Is all of the data that they need access to in the same place, or are they having to go potentially to multiple locations to pull that information?
So we're looking to actually centralize our systems. Right now we have multiple systems, but in the new year, springtime, we're actually looking to centralize to one system. And I think where they're going with this, at least at the organization I work at, is because of the one system, it's an access, improvement. So then you can access the requisition, the POs, the invoicing, everything through this one system. We're actually
Mhm.
in the works of it right now. That makes sense to me now with just having the one system instead of like 5 different systems like we do now, where it makes it challenging to gather the data.
Yep. Yeah. And in the case for customers who maybe don't have that centralization, having an agent that can connect to all 5 of those systems so that I could just go to the agent and say, "Hey, what's the status of PO XYZ?" And the agent behind the scenes can orchestrate across those different systems and tell me exactly in natural language what the status is without me having to go hunt it down.
That's insane. So, yeah, I mean, the whole AI is just I mean, because I've tested quite a few of the different AI tools because I'm curious, I'm interested, and I want to see exactly what it can do, how much it can do, and take over, honestly.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit nervous too about it. Well, I think we've talked enough about the Copilot example. Let's get to some of the questions. Was there a specific moment or experience in your role that made you start questioning if it was the right path for you? I know you've been at Microsoft for over 7, 8 years, I think you mentioned.
Yeah. So when I joined Microsoft, I actually joined within the engineering division, and I was part of a product team that Microsoft had purchased. It was a startup called Volumetrics that became what's now known as our Viva Insights product. And I wouldn't say, I mean, not questioning in any sort of negative way, but the opportunity to join Microsoft came sort of serendipitously in that I had connected with a colleague I had worked with at FICO about just talking about her career and evolution of career as I was being thoughtful about my next steps. And in hearing more about what she was working on, the research she was doing, the customers she was working with, and the types of problems that she was helping them solve. It really opened my eyes to something I wouldn't have even thought was a possibility. And then it turned out that there were openings on an adjacent team to hers, and she was able to make an introduction for me to the hiring manager. And so, in that way, I fell into Microsoft sort of by accident, but 7 years later, it's now definitely on purpose that I want to keep working for Microsoft. And part of what's been fun is that my job has just evolved with the evolution of technology. So the fact that I started off working on this product when I joined, it was called Workplace Analytics. And now I'm a part of our Copilot conversations and helping customers with their Copilot adoption strategy and building agents. I could never have predicted that this would be my career path when I started college, when I started graduate school, when I got my first job after graduate school. It's really just been remaining open to possibility and seeing where that took me.
So then what advice do you have for listeners looking to go into the same career path as you? As you know, AI is growing so much that we can't even keep up. There's so many different type of jobs within AI companies, especially in the Bay Area. What advice do you have for listeners listening if they were interested? Just to dive right in.
Yeah. Well, I do a fair amount of volunteering as a mentor to students early, well, people who are still students, so in college or about to graduate from college, and then folks who are early in their career. My advice right now, and one, I'm a little biased because I went to a liberal arts school and I'm a big believer in a liberal arts education in how it just grounds you in breadth of knowledge that I think is really, really important when we talk about keeping humans in the loop for AI and having a critical eye for how to apply AI, how to interpret the results of AI, and how to think about AI in a responsible and ethical manner. So that's one piece of advice is I don't think pursuing a line of study and I certainly work with a lot of engineers and certainly if you are interested in building AI solutions, having some amount of study in engineering is really important, but also think of the context for how that's going to be applied and and use cases, and don't limit your awareness to just one field. I would say keep your education and your perspective well rounded.
That's great advice, Sonia. I wish I actually took that because I just stayed pretty much in business. Like my major was
Mhm.
business and that was it.
Mhm. Yeah. And I work with a lot of people who have MBAs, which is not something I studied. I've never taken a business class, although I feel like in the last decade of my career working with a lot of businesses and people with business background, I've it's been experiential learning, I suppose, which does not replace an MBA. I don't mean to say that for any folks listening with an MBA, but I think some of that experience is just acquired over time.
Yes, and the MBA, I have an MBA and it was rather difficult to get it because I got it while I was working full time. But I would say it was worth it. Nothing against a bachelor's degree because you need a bachelor's to get an MBA. But for the MBA, I did learn more about how to create a business and how to have a business like fully function and be profitable. Like they actually have you do, it was like a simulation project, at least the one I took, but it's rather challenging. I would only say get an MBA if you're up for the challenge for sure.
That's what I also say about getting a PhD or any sort of advanced degree is you really I think it's important that you really love what it is that you're studying because you're devoting so much of your life and energy to that subject.
Yes, I completely agree. Like you have to really fully devote. And before you even get the MBA, they actually ask you to tell your family members and your partner and all of that, that you're getting one because it's going to take so much time. And it is true. It does take up pretty much your life for a couple years until you get it. I will say that because I went through it. But I wouldn't say it's for everybody. So it just depends on, the type of career path that you're wanting to go on. So what have you learned about yourself that you didn't know before, Sonia? So let's go back.
Let's see, what have I learned about myself recently? That you never stop learning. I wouldn't say that's really a revelation, but I think for me personally, having a career path that has not at all been linear or predictable, the one through line that I can trace in my career is that it's all been related to problem solving. And that is really my passion is for problem solving, and now getting to work with customers to help them solve business problems with Microsoft technology. So, again, I would say 5 years ago, a decade ago, 20 years ago, I would not have imagined myself having daily conversations about AI. And yet, here I am. So, I think, yeah, just being open to what may come, be unafraid to say yes to things even when you don't have all of the details and, try things out and see how it fits.
So you mentioned that you like to problem solve for your clients. Do you feel a sense of fulfillment in your job right now because of that?
I do. I do. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is Microsoft. We really try to work alongside of our customers to, as they're coming up with challenges. And of course, we're a technology company and we're selling software and we sell services as well for our customers and work with partners who sell services. But I think a lot of that is just being able to unlock things for the customers that are coming to us. Be able to find those light bulb moments, help them with their understanding. A lot of times I'm working with customers who, might a person who might be in charge of their Copilot rollout for their organization. So helping them come out with an adoption strategy that's going to help them also be a shining star at their company too, because when the rollout goes well and they get good feedback, that helps them kind of advance in their career.
Do you think that almost every type of business is going to have some form of AI in the next maybe 3 to 5 years because it's moving so quickly?
I think so. And I think the impact is going to be bigger for some industries than others. I mean, like, there's a lot of manufacturing customers that have already been making use of AI in some way, shape, or form to automate production. I think what's different is with the advent of generative AI, and like a good example in healthcare is assisting. Note taking for doctors and physicians that are doing direct service with their patients. And so the idea that you can have kind of ambient listening, Microsoft has solutions for this, to be able to ease a doctor's ability to be present with their patients and provide care, but also collect that data and harness that data. Like we were talking about, transcription during a meeting and being able to take notes. Well, so much of healthcare nowadays is being able to capture all of that data and the history and what people are sharing when they're meeting with their doctors, and for that to be a part of the doctor's and the patient's record, but also easing time for the doctor to be able to focus on patient care rather than just note taking. So I think there's all sorts of ways that we're going to see real tangible impact from AI across different industries.
That's a good example, Sonia, because I literally just saw my doctor a couple of weeks ago or months ago, and he had a phone like that transcribed what was going on. Imagine if AI was taking notes throughout the whole time that we were there.
Mhm.
That would have saved him so much time.
Mhm. Yep, and I think that's a part of what people will start to see as more healthcare providers start to adopt AI, doctors, nurses asking for that consent from patients to be able to transcribe and to record, and for people to be able to see what the benefit is in it for them, to be able to capture all of that data and increase quality of care ultimately. So I think there's some really good outcomes that we can start to see.
Yes, I mean, the documentation within a healthcare organization is so important on all levels. Just documenting the patient, documenting every single thing. Just a note taking portion is, and it's very
Mhm.
time consuming too.
Mhm.
And I've
Yeah.
seen it. I've seen it live. So, I mean, if AI could save time from that, then at least the doctor can focus, like you mentioned, exactly on the patient. It's a different type of care, right?
Right, right. And potentially improve accuracy as well. I mean, there's plenty of times, like, who is not guilty of multitasking when you're sitting in a meeting or having a conversation or something? And so the idea that being able to have that transcription, being able to call, like, I've been in meetings before where I've tuned out or I've gotten distracted by a Teams message pinging or something like that. And I can go back in the transcript and say, what did I miss, or what did this person just say? And I'll get a recap from Copilot that keeps me up to speed and gets me back on task and reminds me not to multitask.
We're always trying to multitask. Actually, I have an episode on that. So if anyone wants to listen to that. Well, Sonia, do you have any other Microsoft Copilot AI that you want to talk about or bring up to the audience before we get into some of your just more fun personal questions?
I don't think so. I would say just, be open to possibility, play around with it, explore.
Perfect. No, I think that's good. That's what I've been doing. Although I think what's going to happen, because I do feel like we're in this, I wouldn't say AI bubble because that's what everyone's saying. But remember when Google and Bing.com and Ask.com and all of that was coming up, and then everything just got acquired. And then it was like some of, the larger companies were taking over. I think that might happen, I think, with AI as well, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Because there's so many in the Bay Area. I mean, I'm seeing them just everywhere, like
Yeah, and
startups.
there's some, I guess, what I would call more point solutions or models that are developed for more specific purposes. So I think there probably will still be a proliferation of kind of built for purpose industry solutions, workflow solutions, agents that can integrate with different software, like all of the major enterprise platforms like SAP, Salesforce, Workday. They're all developing their own agents within their software set as well. So I think we're going to continue to see that. But I think most importantly is for companies, I would say, just to choose within their AI strategy what they want their platform to be, because agent governance is like the next conversation that we're having with a lot of our customers. So just think about their strategy there.
Interesting. I was thinking it's more niche, right, with the AI, the current startups right now. Like you mentioned, it's like specific industry, specific areas that they're trying to solve.
Hmm.
Well, let's get into some of the fun questions. Since we met through wine, we're going to circle back. What are some of your favorite wine regions or recent bottles that's impressed you lately?
Well, I'll put a plug in for my favorite wine shop in Petaluma, which is called Avenage. And I stopped in on Friday and picked up a couple bottles of Beaujolais. So that's just a fun, very seasonal wine coming in from France. Both of these bottles are imported by Kermit Lynch. So I opened one over the weekend and it was just delightful and fresh. And Beaujolais just reminds me of Thanksgiving time because that's typically when it's released. So that's a fun recent drink. And then I will probably, after we're done with this interview, open up a bottle of Riesling, which is
Nice.
just a very fall white to me.
It is a very fall white wine. So I know you like wine and I know you make time for wine, but how do you balance working at Microsoft because you're remote and then your personal time?
So I'm lucky in that I mostly get to be in charge of my own schedule in terms of how I manage my time. Most of the customers I support are on the East Coast. I do have a handful that are on the Pacific time zone. So all that means that my meetings tend to start at 8 a.m. and sometimes earlier than that. So a big part of my balance is just getting up and exercising in the morning. I live close to a great running trail along the Petaluma River, and so that's my preferred way to start my day is just by getting outside and running and getting some fresh air and getting to be in nature and see birds and weasels and deer occasionally cross my path. Hares as well. It feels like I'm in the middle of a Disney movie and there's like birds flying around my head. So a big part of my balance is just starting my day with that kind of mental reset and knowing that I've had that time for myself in the morning before I sit down in front of my computer for the rest of the day.
So you do that daily, Sonia?
Yeah.
That's good.
During the week, always try to get outside unless the weather's too bad or something else is going on.
So since you like to be outside, where is one
Mhm.
place you want to travel to right now that you haven't been to? Because I know you've traveled.
Yes, I have traveled many places. I internationally, I would say I really want to get back to Norway, which is a place I've been a couple times. I do have some relatives that live there, but I'd really like to get farther north in Norway and do some hiking in the fjords there and just experience more of that incredible landscape. And then Japan is another place that I would really like to go and do hiking, enjoy the food and the landscape there. I've known a couple people go take vacations there recently that have piqued my interest.
Yes, Japan is on my list too.
Well,
I'm
let's plan
dying
a
to
trip.
travel. Yes, I'm dying to travel to Japan. I've never been to Norway, and honestly, if anyone is listening to this episode from Norway, that would be nice because I don't have anyone listening from Norway. That's one of the countries.
I'll have to send the interview to some of my relatives over there and then you can get some listeners.
Perfect. That's one country I don't see on my list.
Yeah,
So then, Sonia, what is next for you? Where do you see yourself? I know, totally interview question, but where do you see yourself in 5 years that you could share with the
I
audience?
know. I do not have an answer to that question because I never in my life have had a 5-year plan. I basically, um, and maybe much to the chagrin of my manager, I kind of live on a 1-year timeline since I joined Microsoft of just kind of reevaluating each year, like, where am I at? Am I still enjoying this job? Like, most of my career transitions have been informed by boredom. When I start to get frustrated by what feels like stagnancy and I am looking for new problems to solve. So I really enjoy working for Microsoft. I like the leadership of the company. I feel like we're really grounded in ethics and a responsible approach to AI and continued commitments to sustainability even alongside our mission to expand AI across the globe and expand access to technology in developing countries and all these things. So I would like to continue working for Microsoft. I really like having a role that is customer facing. Again, back to that problem solving of just being able to ideate with customers and be able to see the impact in their business. Yeah, and just continuing to work with the really dynamic and talented team of folks that I get to learn with on a daily basis at Microsoft.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
a great approach, Sonia. Just take it year by year. I'm always 5 years is so far.
as and honestly, I would say some of my career turns, both with Microsoft and when I took my job with FICO, those 5 years prior to when I made that decision, that wasn't a part of my plan. So I think sometimes you can lock yourself in to things when you are too rigid and how you're thinking about your life or your career needs to unfold. And that's not to say you shouldn't have goals and direction and have, some idea of what you want in your life. But yeah, I think just being thoughtful about it and be open. I always say, like with my vacations, I plan for spontaneity or create space for spontaneity. It's like, yeah, have a plan, but also have some flexibility because you don't always know what's going to come up or what technology is down the road that we hadn't even thought of. Like 2 years ago with large language models and generative AI, who'd have known? I'm sure people out there probably knew. I wasn't paying as close of attention.
Yes, yes, exactly. I'm not the planner. I like to leave a little bit, maybe we'll do this. And I just don't want to know everything. I want to kind of go into it a little bit. Not surprised, but, sometimes you do find certain things that you didn't plan and it was fine. It worked out
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
If you can describe your life journey in one word, what would it be?
Unpredictable.
That's a great word. That hasn't been a word I heard. Unpredictable. Because of how open you are to taking opportunities?
I guess so. And in saying that out loud, that was just the first word that came to mind. It's funny because I had a significant part of my career in predictive analytics, and my mathematical mind thinks like, could I have designed a model that would have predicted where I'm at right now from starting off in Puyallup, Washington in 1981? And I don't think a model exists that would have correctly predicted my path. So unpredictable.
Well, that's a great word.
Mm,
Do you have any closing words for the audience about Microsoft Copilot AI, or just to go out there, test out the product, see what it offers?
I would say if you work for a company that uses Microsoft Office, that is kind of entrenched in the Microsoft 365 data estate, you should be asking your leaders for access to Copilot if you don't already have it.
There you go.
Shameless sales plug.
Shameless sales plug. I think it's great because well, first off, thank you for so much for being on the podcast and explaining it, because I think the audience listening, obviously we're in this middle AI, launch where everyone is trying to figure it out as well, right? While we're going through this. But I think this is a great episode because it just opens the eye to explaining it from an internal perspective. That's why.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy to. I'm glad you asked. I
Good.
appreciated the questions that you asked, and it's fun to just reflect and kind of think back. I enjoy these kinds of conversations. I not that I've done this on a podcast before, but like I was saying, and having just volunteering and mentoring, I'm often asked to share about my career journey and how I ended up where I did. And it's never quite exactly the same story, but I think it's good to take these times to pause and reflect. I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Of course. Thank you so much for being on the episode. If anyone listening, which we have listeners from all over the world, if they have any questions about Microsoft Copilot, is it okay to share your information as far as like LinkedIn information?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they can contact you if they have any questions in regards to that. I'm sure they will, because, we're in the middle of it. And again, it's just really neat to test out the product and use it and see exactly what it offers.
No, that's great. And yes, I'm always open to people reaching out on LinkedIn and happy to answer questions and get people connected to the right points of contact as need be.
Perfect.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Sonia. Have a
Thank
good one.
you.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Hi, everyone. Just a reminder, the content provided in our podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with appropriate professionals before making any business decisions based on the information provided in this podcast. We do not endorse any products or services mentioned unless stated in any of our episodes. Thank you for listening.